Decades passed, and Earth transformed in ways once unimaginable. The catalyst had awakened abilities within humanity that reshaped society entirely. People could communicate without words, heal wounds with a touch, and even manipulate energy to create or protect. Cities grew vertically into the skies, powered by clean, limitless energy harnessed from the stars. Wars became rare, replaced by cooperation and understanding, as humans learned to feel each other's pain and joy as their own. Ethan and Claire stood on a distant alien planet, its surface glowing softly under twin suns. They were older now, their hair streaked with gray, but their eyes still sparkled with wonder. Around them stretched fields of crystalline plants that shimmered like liquid light, and strange creatures darted through the air, leaving trails of iridescent mist behind them. "This is incredible," Claire murmured, her voice filled with awe. She reached out to touch one of the glowing plants, watching as it pulsed gently at her fingertips. "I never thought we'd see something like this." Ethan smiled, leaning on a walking stick carved from wood native to another world they'd visited years ago. "Remember when we used to think strength was just about muscles, or power was about machines?" Claire laughed softly. "It feels so small now, doesn't it? Like we were kids playing pretend." They had come far since those early days in Montana, when an ordinary mechanic stumbled upon a mysterious object buried in junk. That discovery had set them, and all of humanity, on a journey beyond Earth's boundaries. Now, colonies thrived on dozens of planets, each one a testament to what humanity could achieve when united by purpose. Children ran past them, laughing as they chased after one of the flying creatures. Their skin glowed faintly, a sign of the catalyst's influence passed down through generations. To Ethan and Claire, these children represented hope, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy itself. They carried within them the potential to build bridges between species, to explore unknown worlds, and to leave a legacy of peace rather than destruction. Nearby, a young girl paused to look up at Ethan and Claire. Her wide eyes reflected curiosity and respect. "Are you really the ones who started it all?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ethan chuckled, kneeling down to meet her gaze. "Not exactly. We were just two people trying to figure things out, same as everyone else. But yes, we were there at the beginning." The girl smiled shyly before running off to join her friends. Claire watched her go, a bittersweet feeling tugging at her heart. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly. "The way things were before?" Ethan shook his head. "Not really. Sure, life was simpler back then, but it wasn't enough. Everything we've built, it's worth the challenges we faced." As they gazed at the horizon, the sky shifted colors, painting itself in hues no human artist could replicate. Somewhere deep inside, they felt the presence of billions of souls connected across vast distances. Humanity had grown stronger not because of individual power, but because of unity. Together, they had risen above fear and division to become something greater. And yet, Ethan and Claire knew they hadn't done it alone. The Varith had guided them, but the choice, and the effort, had always been humanity's. It was proof that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, changing the course of history. Standing there beneath the alien suns, they remembered how fragile humanity once was, how divided, and how, against all odds, they chose to grow. "We're not done yet," Claire said finally, turning to Ethan with a smile. "There's still so much more to discover." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "Yeah, but wherever we go next, we'll face it together." Hand in hand, they walked toward the horizon, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. For humanity, the stars were no longer a distant dream. They were home. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. News of the global consensus spread quickly, sparking both relief and renewed debate. People around the world began organizing forums, town halls, and online discussions to share their thoughts about the catalyst. Some embraced the idea wholeheartedly, seeing it as a chance to heal old wounds and build a brighter future. Others remained cautious, insisting on safeguards and clear limits before moving forward. Ethan and Claire found themselves at the heart of these conversations, traveling from city to listen and speak. They weren't leaders by nature, but they had become symbols of hope for many, a reminder that ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges. Along the way, they met others who inspired them: teachers, farmers, doctors, and artists, all united by a shared desire to shape humanity's destiny. One evening, in a packed auditorium in Chicago, Rachel Monroe stepped onto the stage. Her fiery speeches against the Verith had once fueled resistance, but now her tone was different. She stood quietly for a moment, scanning the crowd before speaking. "I spent my life fighting for freedom," she began, her voice steady but softer than usual. "Freedom from control, from manipulation, from forces that try to tell us who we should be. And when I first heard about the catalyst, I saw it as another threat, something that would take away our choice." She paused, glancing down at her hands. "But then I started listening to stories of families torn apart by war, of communities destroyed by greed, of dreams crushed under the weight of fear. I realized something important. Humanity isn't defined by what we are. It's defined by what we choose to become." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. Rachel took a deep breath, lifting her gaze to meet the audience. "We can't erase the past. We can't undo the mistakes we've made, but we can decide not to repeat them. If this catalyst gives us a chance to do better, to be better, then maybe it's worth the risk." Her words sent ripples through the crowd. Cheers erupted, mixed with tears and applause. Even Ethan and Claire, sitting near the front, felt their hearts swell with emotion. For weeks, they'd struggled to unite opposing voices. Now, finally, they saw glimpses of true unity. Back aboard the Verith ship, Ambassador Seiler observed the progress with quiet approval. "You have done well," it said to Ethan and Claire during one of their visits. "Your species has shown courage and wisdom beyond what many expected." "But it's not over yet," Claire replied, her voice firm. "People still need time to prepare, to understand what this will mean for them." Seiler nodded. "Time is a gift we can offer. Use it wisely." As months passed, the changes became visible. Communities worked together to address lingering fears, creating programs to educate and support those hesitant about the catalyst. Scientists collaborated with the Verith to ensure transparency, sharing data openly so everyone could make informed decisions. Governments set aside differences to focus on building a framework for the transition. Finally, the day arrived when humanity was ready, or as ready as it could be. Representatives from every corner of the globe gathered once more aboard the Verith ship, this time with a unified message: they would accept the catalyst. The activation process was breathtaking. Across the planet, beams of light shot into the sky, connecting millions of people simultaneously. Ethan and Claire held hands tightly as warmth surged through their bodies, filling them with an indescribable sense of connection. It wasn't just physical strength or heightened senses. It was a profound bond, linking every human soul to one another. When it ended, silence fell. Then, slowly, cheers broke out. Humanity had taken its first step toward becoming something greater. Looking up at the stars, Ethan whispered, "We did it." Claire smiled, her eyes shining. "No, we did." And for the first time, the word carried infinite meaning. The Verith called it a moment of truth. They gathered representatives from across the globe: scientists, politicians, activists, and ordinary citizens, to witness what they described as humanity's greatest decision. Ethan and Claire stood at the center of it all, their faces broadcast on screens around the world. The pressure was immense, but they had made a promise to themselves. No matter what happened, they would ensure that every voice was heard. The meeting took place aboard the main Verith ship, its vast chamber glowing with soft light. Floating holograms displayed images of Earth's diverse landscapes: snowy mountains, bustling cities, quiet villages, all reminders of what was at stake. Ambassador Siler addressed the crowd, its voice calm but firm. The catalyst offers you transformation, it said. It will awaken abilities within you, connecting you to each other and to the universe. But this gift requires unity. If even one among you rejects it, the process cannot proceed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Rachel Monroe, seated near the front, stood up abruptly. Her fiery red hair seemed to blaze under the alien lights as she faced the assembly. "How can we trust something we don't fully understand?" she demanded, her voice ringing out. "You're asking us to gamble our humanity on a promise. What if these changes divide us further? What if they destroy who we are?" Her words struck a chord. Murmurs turned into heated debates, voices rising as people argued back and forth. Senator Daniel Hayes tried to restore order, raising his hands for silence. When the room finally quieted, he stepped forward. "Rachel is right to ask questions," Hayes admitted, his tone measured. "But so is everyone else here. This isn't just about saying yes or no. It's about understanding what we truly want. Do we cling to what we know, or do we take a leap into the unknown? That's not a decision any one person can make." Ethan felt the weight of those words settle over him. He glanced at Claire, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, addressing the room for the first time. "I'm not going to tell you what to choose," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves twisting in his stomach. "Claire and I didn't ask for this. We were just two people trying to make sense of something bigger than ourselves. But we've seen what the catalyst can do. It's powerful, yes, but it's also scary. It challenges everything we think we know about strength, about connection, about being human." He paused, looking around the room. "What I've learned is that fear doesn't have to control us. We can face it together. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the catalyst isn't just about changing individuals. It's about teaching us how to work as one." Claire joined him then, her presence lending strength. "We're not perfect," she added softly. "None of us are. But if we let fear keep us apart, we'll never move forward. Let's talk about this, not as enemies, but as humans who share the same home." Her words sparked something in the room. Slowly, conversations began to shift. People started listening to each other, sharing their hopes and fears. Scientists explained the science behind the catalyst. Activists voiced concerns about inequality, and ordinary citizens shared personal stories of loss and resilience. Rachel watched silently, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. For a long time, she resisted the tide of optimism spreading through the group. But when a young girl stood up and spoke about wanting a better future for her siblings, Rachel's expression softened. She realized that rejecting the catalyst outright wasn't the answer, but neither was blind acceptance. By the end of the day, a fragile consensus began to form. Humanity wouldn't rush into this decision. Instead, they would take time to learn, to prepare, and to decide together. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As Ethan and Claire left the chamber, hand in hand, they knew the hardest part was still ahead. But for the first time, they felt a spark of hope. If humanity could come together, even briefly, it might just be strong enough to face whatever came next. The aftermath of the skirmish left Earth's skies eerily quiet. The two Varith fleets had withdrawn to a safe distance, their glowing ships hovering silently as if waiting for the next move. Ethan and Claire stood in their backyard, staring upward, their minds racing with questions they couldn't answer. The fight between the aliens had shown them just how fragile this whole situation was, not only for humanity, but also within the Varith themselves. "This is getting out of hand," Claire said softly, her voice trembling. She still felt drained from using her energy shield the night before, and dark circles framed her eyes. "If they can't even agree among themselves, how are we supposed to trust them?" Ethan didn't respond immediately. He leaned against the fence, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His thoughts were heavy, weighed down by everything he'd learned. The Varith claimed they wanted to help humanity, but their actions. Erasing memories, hiding truths, fighting among themselves, made it hard to believe they truly had Earth's best interests at heart. "We're stuck in the middle," he finally said, his tone bitter. "They say we have a choice, but do we really? If we say no, what happens then? Do they leave us alone, or does Zinara's faction decide we're too dangerous to ignore?" Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. "And if we said yes, what happens to us? To everyone? What if the catalyst changes us in ways we can't come back from?" Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of car engines approaching. A convoy of vehicles pulled up to their house, kicking up clouds of dust. Out stepped Senator Daniel Hayes, flanked by a team of aides and security personnel. His expression was grim as he approached them. "We need to talk," Hayes said without preamble. "Things are escalating faster than anyone anticipated. Protests are turning violent, governments are divided. And now this conflict in the sky. People are scared, Ethan. They're looking for answers." Ethan gestured toward the house. "Come inside. We'll explain what we know." Over coffee, they recounted everything: the archives, the Caliph, the split among the Verith. Hayes listened intently, his brow furrowed. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. "This isn't just about technology or power," he said slowly. "It's about identity, about who we are as a species. If we accept the catalyst, we risk losing ourselves. But if we reject it, we might miss an opportunity to grow in ways we can't imagine." Claire nodded, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. "That's exactly it. And not everyone will see it the same way. Some people will embrace it fully, while others will fight it tooth and nail. How do you make a decision like that when there's no clear right answer?" Hayes hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Maybe the answer isn't one person, or even one group, deciding for everyone. Maybe it's about finding common ground, bringing people together to figure this out as a planet, instead of letting fear and division tear us apart." His words struck a chord with Ethan. For weeks, he and Claire had been focused on their own doubts and fears, caught up in the chaos swirling around them. But Hayes was right. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about all of humanity. As the senator prepared to leave, he turned back to face them. "Whatever happens next, you two are at the center of it. Whether you like it or not, people are watching you, listening to you. You've got a chance to shape this moment, but it won't be easy." After Hayes left, Ethan and Claire sat in silence for a long time. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on their shoulders. They weren't leaders, weren't heroes, just ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Finally, Claire broke the quiet. "We can't do this alone. But maybe we don't have to." Ethan looked at her, a flicker of hope sparking in his chest. "You're right. If we want humanity to move forward, to really choose its own path, we'll need more voices, more perspectives." For the first time in days, they felt a glimmer of clarity. The road ahead would be uncertain, even painful. But if they could bring people together, if they could find unity in the face of fear, they might just stand a chance. Ethan spent hours in the Verith archives, a vast chamber filled with glowing panels that displayed information in shimmering streams of light. The aliens had granted him access to their records, hoping it would help him understand their mission better. But as he sifted through the data, something caught his attention. Fragments of an old story, buried deep within the archives. It spoke of another species, long gone now, called the Caliph. They were conquerors, not guides, and they had once set their sights on Earth. According to the records, the Caliph saw humanity as weak and primitive, a target ripe for domination. The Verith intervened, driving the Caliph away and erasing all traces of their presence from human memory. Their goal was to protect Earth until its people were ready to face the universe. Ethan's heart raced as he pieced together the truth. He felt a mix of gratitude and unease. The Verith had saved humanity, but at what cost? Erasing memories sounded too much like control, no matter how noble their intentions. And if they'd done it before, could they do it again? When Ethan confronted Ambassador Siler, the lead Varith, his suspicions hardened into certainty. Standing in the sleek, humming chamber aboard the alien ship, Ethan held up the fragment of the archive he'd uncovered. "Why didn't you tell us about this?" he demanded, his voice sharper than usual. "You erased an entire invasion from our history. How can we trust you when you've hidden things like this?" Siler's crystalline features remained calm, but there was a flicker of something in its glowing eyes. Hesitation, perhaps, or regret. "The knowledge would have harmed you," it replied. "Your species was not prepared to carry the weight of such truths. That's not your decision to make." Ethan shot back. His hands trembled slightly, anger mixing with frustration. "You can't just decide what we're ready for. We're not children." Claire stood nearby, watching silently. She understood Ethan's outrage, but she also saw the complexity of the situation. The Varith weren't villains. They truly believed they were helping. Still, the revelation shook her faith in them. If they could manipulate history, what else might they be hiding? Later, as they discussed the discovery in private, Claire voiced her concerns. "Do you think they'll lie to us again? Or worse, try to control us?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But I don't think we're the only ones questioning them." He was right. Back on the Varith ship, divisions were growing among the aliens themselves. Some agreed with Siler's approach, believing humanity needed careful guidance. Others, however, thought humans were too unpredictable to trust with the catalyst. These dissenters argued that giving humans such power could destabilize the galaxy. Tensions escalated when a second Varith fleet arrived unexpectedly, led by a commander named Zenara. Her ships descended near the original fleet, and her message was clear. She opposed Siler's plan. "Your actions are reckless," Zenara declared during a tense meeting aboard the main ship. "Humanity is volatile. Allowing them access to the catalyst risks disaster." Siler stood firm. "They have shown courage and curiosity. To deny them this chance would be unjust." The argument grew heated, and soon the disagreement spilled over into action. Zenara's forces attempted to seize control of the catalyst, leading to a brief but intense skirmish between the two factions. Energy beams crackled through the air, lighting up the night sky above Earth. Down below, chaos erupted. Civilians scrambled for cover as stray blasts struck buildings and power lines. Claire, who had been practicing her newfound abilities, instinctively raised a shield of energy to protect a group of terrified children. The act drained her, leaving her exhausted, but it saved lives. As the battle subsided, Ethan and Claire looked at each other, their faces pale with shock. The Varith weren't united, not even among themselves. If they couldn't agree, how could humanity ever hope to navigate this path? For the first time, doubt crept into Ethan's mind. Was accepting the catalyst worth the cost? Or was it just another step toward losing control of their own destiny? News of the Varith's arrival spread quickly, faster than Ethan and Claire could have imagined. At first, it was just whispers in their small Montana town, strange lights in the sky, rumors of visitors from another world. But soon, the story exploded across the globe. Social media buzzed with videos of the silver ships hovering over cities, news outlets scrambled for interviews, and governments called emergency meetings to address the growing panic. In Chicago, a woman named Rachel Monroe stood at the center of the storm. She was an activist known for her fiery speeches and unshakable belief in human independence. With sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority, she had spent years fighting against what she saw as threats to freedom. Big corporations, invasive technologies, and now aliens. "This isn't about progress," Rachel shouted into a microphone, standing on a makeshift stage in front of a crowd of thousands. "This is about control. They're asking us to trust them, but how do we know they won't take away everything that makes us human?" The crowd roared in agreement, holding up signs that read, "Stay Earthbound," and "No alien interference." Rachel's words struck a chord with people who felt uneasy about the changes happening around them. For every person excited by the idea of unlocking new abilities, there were others terrified of losing their identity, or worse, their freedom. Back in Washington, D.C., Senator Daniel Hayes sat in a packed conference room, listening to heated debates among world leaders. Some argued that humanity should embrace the Verith's offer, seeing it as a chance to leap forward technologically and socially. Others, like Hayes, urged caution. "We don't know enough yet," Hayes said firmly, leaning forward in his chair. "These aliens may seem friendly, but we can't ignore the risks. What if this catalyst changes us in ways we can't reverse? What if it creates divisions instead of unity?" His concerns weren't unfounded. Reports began surfacing of protests turning violent. In Paris, demonstrators clashed with police outside a government building where officials were meeting with the Verith. In Tokyo, hackers claimed to have infiltrated alien tech, only to trigger malfunctions that caused blackouts across the city. Fear bred chaos, and chaos bred resistance. Ethan and Claire watched it all unfold on television, their hearts heavy. They understood the fear. They'd felt it themselves. But they also knew the potential benefits of working with the Verith. Still, seeing the anger and distrust grow made them question whether humanity was ready for such a massive change. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, Claire turned off the TV and sighed. "Do you think we made the wrong choice?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head, though doubt lingered in his mind. "I don't know. Maybe. But even if we did, it's too late to turn back now." Their thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. When Ethan opened it, he found two men in suits standing on the porch. One flashed a badge. "We're here to ask some questions," he said bluntly. For the next hour, Ethan and Claire answered inquiries about their experiences with the Verith. The agents took notes but offered little information in return. By the time they left, Claire was visibly shaken. "They're watching us," she said, pacing the room. "What happens if people start blaming us for all of this?" Ethan didn't have an answer. He knew they were caught between two sides, those eager to embrace the future and those desperate to cling to the past. As tensions rose, so did the stakes. Acts of sabotage became more frequent. Power grids failed near Verith landing sites. Anonymous groups claimed responsibility, vowing to drive the aliens away. Amid the turmoil, Rachel Monroe's influence grew. Her speeches inspired not just protests but action. One night, a group of her followers attempted to destroy a piece of alien equipment stored in a research facility. Though the attempt failed, it sent a clear message. Humanity wasn't going to accept change without a fight. As Ethan and Claire lay in bed that night, listening to distant sirens wailing through the darkness, they realized something important. The real challenge wasn't convincing people to trust the Verith. It was helping humanity trust itself. And that might be the hardest task of all. The Verith ship hovered silently above the junkyard, its sleek surface reflecting the pale morning light. Ethan and Claire stood side by side, their hands clasped tightly as they prepared to step aboard. The aliens had extended an invitation, promising answers to their questions and a glimpse of what the catalyst could truly do. But as they approached the glowing ramp that led into the vessel, both felt a mix of awe and unease. Inside, the ship was unlike anything they'd ever imagined. The walls shimmered faintly, as if alive, and the air carried a soft hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. There were no sharp corners or harsh edges. Everything flowed seamlessly, creating an atmosphere that was both alien and strangely calming. The Verith guided them to a chamber filled with floating orbs of light that pulsed gently, like heartbeats. "This is where you will begin," one of the Verith said, its voice resonating softly. "The catalyst will awaken your latent abilities. It may feel overwhelming at first, but trust in yourselves." Ethan glanced at Claire, who gave him a small, nervous smile. "Ready?" she asked quietly. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, though his stomach churned with uncertainty. The Verith gestured for them to stand in the center of the room. As soon as they did, the orbs began to circle them, casting soft beams of light onto their skin. At first, nothing happened. Then, a warm sensation spread through Ethan's body, starting at his chest and radiating outward. He felt stronger, lighter, as if every muscle in his body had been fine-tuned. Beside him, Claire gasped, her eyes widening as she lifted her hand and watched it glow faintly. "What's happening to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are becoming more than you were," the Varith explained. "Your senses are sharpening. Your mind is opening to new ways of understanding. This is only the beginning." As the process continued, Ethan noticed changes within himself. Colors seemed brighter, sounds clearer. He could hear Claire's heartbeat, steady but quickened by excitement or fear. When he reached out to touch her shoulder, he felt something else. A connection, almost like reading her thoughts without words. Startled, he pulled his hand back. "Did you feel that?" Claire asked, looking at him with wide eyes. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I think so. Is this part of it?" The Varith confirmed with a slight nod. "You are learning to communicate beyond speech. Such bonds will grow stronger over time." But not everything about the transformation was pleasant. Later that night, after returning home, Claire tossed and turned in bed, plagued by vivid dreams. She saw flashes of unfamiliar landscapes, burning cities, towering machines, and shadowy figures watching from the darkness. Each image left her breathless, her heart pounding as if she'd lived through it herself. Ethan wasn't spared either. Though physically drained, his mind raced with thoughts that weren't entirely his own. He felt moments of overwhelming loneliness, as if separated from everyone he loved, even when Claire lay beside him. The sensations were fleeting but jarring, leaving him questioning whether these powers came with a hidden cost. The next day, they returned to the ship, hoping for answers. The Varith listened patiently as they described their experiences. "These effects are temporary," the ambassador assured them. "Your bodies and minds are adjusting to the changes. With practice, you will learn to control them." Despite the reassurance, doubt lingered. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being pushed too fast, forced to adapt to something they barely understood. Claire, on the other hand, found herself torn between fear and fascination. The glowing light she could now summon from her fingertips amazed her, but the nightmares made her wonder if she was paying too high a price. As days turned into weeks, Ethan and Claire grew closer in some ways, yet farther apart in others. Their newfound abilities brought them strength, but also isolation. They realized that while the catalyst offered incredible potential, it demanded sacrifices they hadn't anticipated. And deep down, they wondered, was humanity ready for such power, or would it tear them apart instead? The Varith's words hung in the air, heavy and full of meaning. Ethan and Claire stood rooted to the spot, their minds racing to make sense of what they were hearing. The aliens' calm demeanor did little to ease the tension building inside them. They had gone from ordinary people living quiet lives to being thrust into something far beyond their understanding. "What do you mean, greatness or destruction?" Claire asked finally, her voice steady despite the fear flickering in her eyes. She tightened her grip on Ethan's hand, drawing strength from his presence. The Varith tilted its head slightly, as if considering how best to explain. "Your species is capable of incredible things: creativity, innovation, connection. But you are also divided by conflict, greed, and fear. The catalyst we bring can unlock your true potential, but it requires unity and trust." Ethan frowned, glancing back at the glowing object still sitting on the kitchen table. "This catalyst, what exactly does it do?" "It awakens abilities within you that have lain dormant for generations," the Varith replied. "Strength, perception, even communication beyond spoken language. These gifts will allow humanity to join us among the stars, but they must be embraced willingly. If forced, the results could be catastrophic." Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. "And if we say no, what happens then?" The Varith paused, its glowing eyes locking onto hers. "Then we leave. Your world will continue as it has, untouched by our influence. But know this, others may not share our patience or goodwill. Ethan exchanged a glance with Claire, silently asking what she thought. Neither of them knew enough yet to make such a huge decision, but one thing was clear, they couldn't ignore this. Whatever choice they made would affect everyone on Earth. We need time to think about this, Ethan said slowly. Can you give us that? The Varith nodded. You have until sunrise. Use it wisely. With that, the aliens retreated to their ships, leaving Ethan and Claire alone once again. The hum of the object faded, plunging the house into an eerie silence. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The weight of the situation pressed down on them like a storm cloud ready to burst. Finally, Claire broke the silence. Do you believe them? About the catalyst, I mean. Ethan shrugged, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. It sounds too good to be true. But those ships out there, they're real. And so is this thing. He pointed to the object on the table. We can't just pretend none of this happened. Claire sighed, sinking into a chair. What do you think people will say when they find out? Some might see it as a miracle, but others, they'll call it dangerous. Maybe even evil. Ethan nodded grimly. Yeah, I thought about that. There's going to be chaos, protests, maybe even violence. But if the Varith are telling the truth, turning them away could mean missing out on something amazing. They spent the rest of the night discussing possibilities, weighing the risks and rewards. As dawn approached, they realized they couldn't make this decision alone. Humanity deserved a voice in its own future. When the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, the Varith returned. This time, they brought holographic projections showing scenes of advanced civilizations thriving across galaxies. Cities floated among stars, and beings of all shapes and sizes worked together in harmony. It was beautiful and terrifying in its vastness. We offer partnership, not dominion, the Varith ambassador said. Will you accept? Ethan took a deep breath, looking at Claire. She gave him a small nod, her expression resolute. Turning back to the Varith, Ethan spoke firmly. Yes, we'll do it, but we'll need help explaining this to the rest of the world. The Varith's crystalline face seemed to soften, almost like a smile. You have taken the first step toward a brighter future. Together, we will guide your kind to greatness. As the ships ascended into the sky, Ethan and Claire watched, hearts pounding. They didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. Life as they knew it would never be the same again. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling groggy and disoriented. For a moment, he thought the strange events of the night before had been a dream. But when he walked into the kitchen, the object was still there on the table, its surface faintly shimmering in the sunlight streaming through the window. Claire was already seated at the table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, staring at the device with a mix of curiosity and unease. What do you think it is? She asked softly, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a hint of worry, though she tried to sound calm. Ethan shook his head. I don't know. But it's not from around here. That's for sure. They spent most of the day trying to figure out what the object could be. Ethan used tools from his workshop to examine it more closely, but no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't find any seams or buttons. It was as if the thing had been made all at once, without pieces that could be taken apart. Claire suggested they take pictures and search online, hoping someone might recognize it. But even after hours of scrolling through forums and websites, they found nothing that matched. As evening approached, the hum returned. This time, it wasn't just a soft vibration. It filled the entire house, making the windows rattle slightly. The symbols on the object began to glow again, brighter than before. Ethan and Claire exchanged nervous glances as the light grew stronger, casting shadows across the walls. Then suddenly, the room went silent. A voice spoke, not from the object itself, but seemingly from everywhere at once. It was deep and resonant, yet strangely soothing. We have waited. It said, you are ready. Claire gasped, clutching Ethan's arm. What? What was that? She stammered. Before Ethan could answer, the air outside seemed to shift. A low rumble echoed in the distance, growing louder by the second. They rushed to the window and pulled back the curtains. What they saw made their breath catch in their throats. Hovering above the junkyard was a massive ship, sleek and silver, glowing faintly against the darkening sky. Its shape was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Smooth curves and sharp angles blended together seamlessly, giving it an otherworldly appearance. Smaller crafts detached from the main vessel, descending slowly toward the ground. Are those aliens? Claire whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan didn't respond. He was too stunned to speak. The smaller ships landed gently in the field near the junkyard, kicking up clouds of dust. From one of them emerged tall figures with crystalline skin that sparkled like diamonds under the moonlight. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their movements were graceful, almost hypnotic. One of the beings stepped forward, raising a hand in what seemed like a gesture of peace. "Do not fear," the same voice from earlier said, this time clearer and closer. "We are the Varith. We come in friendship." Ethan and Claire stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Finally, Ethan managed to find his voice. "What do you want from us?" The Varith tilted its head slightly, as if considering the question. "Your kind has reached a turning point," it replied. "You possess potential beyond your understanding. We are here to guide you, to help you unlock what lies dormant within." Claire tightened her grip on Ethan's arm. "Potential? What does that mean?" The Varith gestured toward the object still sitting on the kitchen table. "That device is a beacon. It signaled our arrival. You were chosen because you found it. Your action showed curiosity and courage, qualities we value." Ethan glanced at Claire, who looked just as bewildered as he felt. Chosen? By aliens? It sounded insane, like something out of a movie. Yet there was no denying the reality standing right in front of them. "We will explain more," the Varith continued. "But first, we must ensure you understand the importance of what comes next. Humanity stands on the edge of greatness or destruction. The choice is yours." As the Varith spoke, Ethan realized this wasn't just about him and Claire anymore. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than both of them. And somehow, they were now at the center of it. Ethan Cole wiped the sweat from his forehead as he leaned over the old machine. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the junkyard where he worked. It wasn't much of a job, fixing broken-down tractors, rusted tools, and forgotten appliances. But it paid the bills. He liked the quiet out here, away from the noise of the small Montana town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. Today, though, something felt different. As Ethan pried open the panel of an ancient tractor engine, his wrench hit something that didn't belong. A hollow metallic clang echoed through the air. Curious, he reached inside and pulled out a strange object. It was about the size of a coffee mug, smooth and oddly warm to the touch. Its surface shimmered faintly, like oil on water, and strange symbols were etched into its sides. "What in the world is this?" Ethan muttered under his breath. He turned it over in his hands, trying to figure out what it could be. It didn't look like any part he'd ever seen before. Not from a car, not from a tractor, not even from one of those old radios people sometimes brought him to repair. Whatever it was, it didn't seem human-made. When he shook it gently, the object hummed softly, almost like it was alive. Startled, Ethan nearly dropped it. "Okay, that's new," he said aloud, glancing around as if someone might have answers. But the junkyard was empty except for rows of scrap metal and the occasional crow perched on a pile of discarded tires. By the time Ethan got home, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. His wife, Claire, was in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup when he walked in, holding the mysterious object carefully in both hands. She looked up and raised an eyebrow. "What did you find now?" "Another rusty relic." "This one's different," Ethan replied, setting it down on the table. He explained how he'd discovered it and showed her the faint glow it gave off. Claire frowned, leaning closer to inspect it. "It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen either," she admitted. "Do you think it's dangerous?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't know. It doesn't feel dangerous. Just weird." For the rest of the evening, they sat at the kitchen table, examining the object together. Ethan tried pressing the symbols etched into its surface, but nothing happened. Claire suggested shining a flashlight on it, thinking maybe light would trigger something. Still nothing. Frustrated but intrigued, they decided to leave it alone for the night. Hours later, as they lay in bed, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about it. Something about the object tugged at him, like it was calling out silently. He tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Finally, he gave up and went back to the kitchen. The house was dark, and still, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. As Ethan picked up the object again, it began to hum louder, vibrating slightly in his palm. Without warning, a beam of light shot upward, illuminating the ceiling. Strange patterns danced across the room, shifting and rearranging themselves like puzzle pieces falling into place. Ethan stumbled backward, heart racing, as the symbols on the object glowed brighter. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the light faded, leaving the room dim once more. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the object in disbelief. What had just happened? And more importantly, what did it mean? Little did he know, this discovery would change everything. Not just for him and Claire, but for all of humanity.